Welcome to the Pursuing Points podcast, where it's all about the pursuit of credit card points and miles today so that you can travel the world free of charge tomorrow. And now, your host, Peter Foti.
Hello, Pursuing Points podcast listeners. Welcome back to another episode. It has been a very long time since we have recorded a podcast, but I think the wait was worth it. We have a special guest today that we have not yet had, or I guess we haven't had in over 3 years. Michael Fabiano. Michael, how are you?
Doing well, Peter. How are you?
Oh, I am just doing fantastic.
Fantastic.
So long time listeners will remember you, right? Because we had you on, what did we decide, 3.5 years ago to talk about the, at that time, the newly released Chase Sapphire Reserve.
Yeah, it's exciting because we're back to talk about the same topic today, but things have changed over the past 3 years, including a very large set of announcements about changing costs and benefits about a week ago.
That's exactly right. And so basically, for those who aren't, or if this is your first episode, 3.5 years ago, I had Michael on the show. I signed up for the card live on the program. Did you also sign up, or had you already signed up for it?
Oh, gosh, I can't remember. We'll have to go back and check, but it was around that time. We were both getting the card at the time.
Yeah, either way, it had just come out. It had the 100,000 point sign-up bonus, which was, I think, basically unprecedented at that time. We both signed up, and the card, for all intents and purposes, have served us pretty well for the last 3 years. Don't you agree?
Yeah, it's kind of funny because it's so long ago that I actually had forgotten until you just said that what the sign-up bonus was. That alone, 100,000 points must have ended up netting us $2,300 or $2,400 worth of travel benefits. So, if we hadn't gotten anything else over the balance of the time we've had with the card, we would have come out ahead just from that bonus. That really was completely insane.
Yeah, it was quite significant. And, even though the annual fee for the car was $450, certainly upon signing up, you didn't think about it at all, right? Because it had the sign-up bonus.
Correct. Yep. And then the travel credit set in immediately.
That's exactly right. And I also think back then we did a little bit of double dipping with the travel credit because if memory serves, originally the travel credit was calendar year based instead of card year.
That's correct. Yep. So I feel like you said when we were talking before we started recording that we signed up in August. So yep. I think if I recall, we jammed through the travel credit before the new fiscal year for Chase started in mid-December. And then you get another $300 before you even get charged $450 the second time. Oh, pretty incredible. Great times.
Great times indeed. And now things have changed. So I guess before we talk about the changes, we can just give a brief overview. I'm sure pretty much everyone is familiar with this product, but at a high level, the card was $450. It had a $300 travel credit, which basically meant that for your first $300 in spend on travel purchases, you're automatically reimbursed, which means, as we refer to it, the net effective annual fee is only $150. It has 3x on travel and dining, and then a host of other benefits in terms of priority pass lounge membership and TSA PreCheck reimbursement. But a lot of that stuff I find is duplicated across other products, so it's not as interesting. And I've done episodes where I've dove deep into all of the benefits, but I'm going to sort of assume that you're somewhat familiar with the card, and then we're really just going to talk about a lot of the upcoming changes.
Yeah, the only thing that I'll call out about that travel credit is, as Peter and I were talking about a minute ago, you were able to do some double dipping in that first year because of the rolling year versus calendar year distinction between the way the annual fee and travel credits were applied. But the other thing that I've found has been really nice about the travel card for me is I do a lot of ride sharing, even right around town where I live, and they're very permissive about what they reimburse for. So even ride shares in town, taxis, things like that, end up getting reimbursed on the $300 travel credit. So what makes it such an amazing benefit is even if you're not the kind of person who does a tremendous amount of traveling, you're going to burn through those $300 in just normal spending in a year.
Yeah, ideally speaking, for sure. I went back and forth with someone the other day on my YouTube channel because I have a video where it says here are the 5 reasons why you should not sign up for the Chase Sapphire Reserve. And one of them is, if you're not someone like yourself, or if you're traveling or ride sharing, what have you, and you can't make full use of that $300 benefit, then you probably shouldn't sign up for it. And Chase actually they have this document where it's something like 6% of their users don't use the card at all. 6% of all Sapphire Reserve owners have $0 in spend on the card. And so you can assume that even if the other 94% are using it, if 6% are using it or not using it at all, some of the ones who are using it probably aren't getting full use out of it. And so I just bring that up to say, maybe you should check out that video and make sure that it is right for you, especially now that it's going to become more expensive.
Absolutely.
Which is a great segue to the fact that it's becoming more expensive. So I think it was like last week or the last couple weeks anyway. First, it was a rumor. I first saw it on, I think, doctorofcredit.com, where he had said that it looks like the annual fee is going to be increasing from $450 to $550. And then I think a few days later, it was all but confirmed. And now we know that the annual fee is increasing to $550 for new users starting on January 12th, which is today. If you're an existing user and your card has not yet renewed in 2020, you won't have to pay the $550 until after April, which means if you are an existing card holder and your card comes up for renewal in, say, February of this year, you'll still renew at the $450 level. And Chase didn't take away any benefits, but they did try to add a couple to sort of soften the blow. And I guess we could sort of talk through what some of those are before we get into whether or not this is still a good value and I guess how it compares to other premium products.
Absolutely. Where should we start?
So I guess the first one we could start with is Lyft Pink. So I think neither you nor I were super familiar with this. I'm actually not a Lyft user, but I think you somewhat are. And you said you see it on the app when you're like requesting a ride, like you can get it for cheaper. Is that right?
Yeah, and I just tend to switch back and forth between Lyft and Uber, depending upon which is cheaper. I'll request my ride in both and see which comes up at a lower price. But Peter and I were talking before we started recording, and essentially this is that thing. And Uber has one as well. If you're ordering a ride in one of the two main ride sharing apps, Uber or Lyft, when you confirm the ride, it pops up a little box in the bottom of the screen and asks, "Do you want to get this ride for a price that apparently is 15% less than the price that you agreed to when you clicked the order button?" And you get that by signing up for one of these subscription services, either Lyft Pink or whatever Uber's version is. I can't remember what it's called. And so in doing so, you pay a monthly fee, which we can talk about, which then nets you essentially a 15% discount on your rides.
Yeah. So Lyft Pink, it's $19.99 a month, and they list the perks as being 15% savings on all rides, which you mentioned, 3 complimentary bike and scooter rides a month, priority airport pickups. It says surprise offers and upgrades, so who knows what that means. Free cancellations up to 3 times a month if you cancel and rebook within 15 minutes. Waived lost and found fees, and exclusive partnership benefits, car rental perks, and more. So from a pure cost perspective, right, $99 a month, 12 months, this is worth about $240. In theory, that's technically what it's worth, right? If you were someone who was already paying $20 a month for the service, and now you can cancel it because you're going to get it free with your Chase Sapphire Reserve, then certainly the increase in annual fee has been more than made up for by the fact that they saved you, I guess, net effective $140.
That's correct. Yep.
If you're someone who wasn't already paying for it, is it still worth it by itself? So for me, my sort of, I guess, ground transportation habits are, I live in New York City, so the subway is sort of like 80 to 90% of my ground transportation. If I don't take the subway and it's close, I walk, and then otherwise I tend to take a taxi. I think the only time I really opt for Uber or Lyft would be to and from the airport, just because it's sometimes easier to get dropped off there. But it's also so expensive to take an Uber and a Lyft. Like, to take the subway is free, so it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. You just kind of have to be feeling extremely lazy.
Well, and even if you are feeling that extremely lazy, my understanding is that if you're going from Manhattan to JFK, which seems like it's probably your usual itinerary, isn't there a flat taxi ride for $25? Which every time I've ever checked has been like $15 or $20 cheaper than the Lyfts or Ubers. I feel like if you're in like lower Manhattan going to JFK in an Uber or a Lyft, it's ridiculously expensive. I'm blown away by it every time I open the app.
Yeah, so I almost never fly to JFK. JFK is extremely far away from where I live. The Uber ride to JFK is like anywhere from 50 to 80 one way. I've never seen a $25 taxi thing. maybe that exists, and if it does, I'll have to look into it more. But I've never heard of that. And then I usually go to LaGuardia, which I would say the Uber or Lyft one way is probably like between 30 and 40.
That's not that bad.
But in the case, like you can take the subway to LaGuardia, it's completely free if you have like an unlimited pass. And then if you go to JFK, it's free, but you have to pay $5 for the air train.
Gotcha.
So anyway, I mean, from my perspective, I would have to sort of change my travel habits to support or to like reap the benefits of this program, which is like it. I mean, that's okay, right? I've certainly changed, I guess, both spending and redemption patterns based on credit card benefits in the past, but I don't know if this is like an interesting enough proposition for me to say that, because here's the thing, I was already considering canceling this product,
right?
Which we can talk more about later, but this by itself doesn't really do a whole lot for me. And the thing that's, I think, especially surprising is that when I first read about this, my assumption was that you had this benefit sort of in perpetuity, right? Like you were going to get a Lyft Pink membership as long as you were a Chase Sapphire Reserve card holder. But according to the points guy in his article that he wrote, it says that customers will receive 1 free year of this service or this program. So
that's correct. Yep.
Again, in the first year, if you're a Lyft user and or if you're already paying for the service, makes a ton of sense. But beyond that, especially if they're taking it away, all of a sudden that the annual fee has increased and the benefit that they gave you to make up for it is gone. Now, it could just be that they only signed like a 1-year deal with Lyft and that they might renew it. And I guess we'll just sort of have to wait and see. But I thought that was interesting, right? Like,
yeah, there's probably some funky accounting stuff going on, in terms of the way that they're recognizing the revenue from the card's annual fees, as well as any other ancillary revenue they're getting through individual subscribers' spending habits, and then the way they're accounting for the cost of these benefits that we probably don't understand all the particulars of. And then I would assume that they're making an assumption that some percentage of customers will choose not to cancel emotionally now based on the increased annual fee, and then will just sort of revert back to that kind of like, I think the way that a lot of people unfortunately think about their spending, which is not really thinking about it at all, where once that emotional pain of finding out the cost of something is going to increase fades away, you're not necessarily behaving rationally and making changes to your spending habits. And I think they're probably making an assumption that if they can get someone to stay on for another 6 or 7 months because they've got this Lyft deal, that some percentage of those hangers on are just going to forget that the price ever went up in the first place and end up signed up for 2 or 3 more years.
Yeah, it's like the breakage business model, right? It's like the reason that you have to activate your Chase Freedom 5X category isn't because there's no like technical reason that you have to do that. It's just because they know some amount of people are going to forget, right? So you signed up because of this marketing material, which was like, oh, you get 5X on grocery store purchases. But if you don't ever turn it on, yeah, exactly.
And they know some percentage of folks are never going to redeem their cashback rewards on the Freedom, never going to redeem their travel points in any of these products, and that's all. They've got, I'm sure, very smart, business analysts and pricing analyst folks who are figuring all this stuff out and what the exact right way is to do this to maximize profitability of these products. So for me, I actually find these benefits around Lyft extremely compelling. And I will just call out, because we haven't mentioned it explicitly, that the free Lyft Pink for a year isn't the only Lyft related benefit that they are offering in kind for this increased annual fee. They've also increased the point earning on Lyft rides from 3 points per dollar, which applies to all travel related charges right now, to 10 points per dollar. And ground transit habit wise, I probably couldn't be more different from Peter. I live in a kind of small to medium sized city in upstate New York called Rochester. We don't really have any public transit here except for a bus system that doesn't come to most of the stops very frequently. And so I really drive everywhere that I go. And then, on the other end of that, I have an extremely firm no drinking and driving policy. And so I find that anytime I go to any establishment that has alcohol, I'll end up taking a $10 to $15 Lyft or Uber either to the place if I anticipate drinking and then home afterward, or home afterward once I've ended up consuming alcohol. And that results in me spending, I'd have to go in and check, but I must spend several $100s a year on ride shares just around town because of that policy. And so 15% savings on that plus 10%, plus 10 point per dollar earning on Lyft purchases. I'm going to have to do some spreadsheeting later today, pull some of my transaction history to figure it out. But it feels like it could be a very good deal to a user with my habits. So kind of two different sides of the same coin there.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. I think everybody should have the same no drinking and driving policy as you do. And yeah, even if you say conservatively, I don't know how conservative this is, but I don't know, is $500 a year, is that too much on Lyft, or is that about what you think you might spend?
It feels like it's probably right, especially if you factor in, any Lyft or Uber riding, which obviously, if I were to keep this card, I would convert entirely to Lyft on my several trips that I take per year.
Yeah.
It probably is about $500. Then 15% of that is $75 plus the 10x earning. That's pretty significant, even in the face of a $100 annual fee increase.
Right. Yeah. At that point, right, the 50% that you had saved to get to the 500, it's $75, and then the 10x at a minimum is worth, say, $50, and then if you use the 50% bonus, now it's worth $75. So certainly you could more than make up for this, at least in the first year, if you're someone who uses Lyft. And then the other new benefit that is being offered is a $120 or it's $120 worth of DoorDash credits. So DoorDash, of course, is the app where you can order food. It has competitors like Uber Eats and Grubhub. And so with those credits, basically it says that you get $60 in credits in 2020, $60 in credits in 2021, and then TBD if you're going to get them in 2022. That's another one of those, they're sort of waiting to see if they're going to renew the partnership, I guess. And then they're also giving you a free Dash Pass for a year. Do you use any of these services?
So I don't, and maybe you've done some more research on this, and you can help me understand. I use Grubhub and Uber Eats pretty frequently.
Mm-hmm.
I've never installed the DoorDash app on my phone. I assume that it works very similarly to those two. So I'm reading about this on the Points Guys website right now, and just like you mentioned, it is a $60 max annual credit this year and next year in 2021. What does that credit apply to? Is that just to the purchase in and of itself? So I could order 6 $10 meals and a year? Does it only apply to certain components of the purchase, like the DoorDash related fees? I'm not sure, because this to me as well, as someone who orders delivery probably at least 2 or 3 times a month, could also be extremely compelling as an ancillary benefit.
Yeah, my understanding of the credits, my understanding is that they apply to the entire order. So it's not just fees or just food and beverage; it's everything. So
that's pretty cool. That's a pretty good benefit, actually. It's $60 a year.
I think you'll probably get reimbursed the same way you do for the travel credit. And then the free, Dash Pass is DoorDash is like $9.99 a month membership program, and I think it basically just gives you. I think it gives you like free delivery, and then maybe some cheaper fees. And it's one of those things. Not every restaurant is eligible for the program, so it's not like you're going to get free delivery on every order. But DoorDash says that you can save on average of $4 to $5 an order, which is nice. So in that case, again, Dash Pass $10 a month. So the face value is $120, and then you also get the $60 in credits. And then that one again, it Chase is only committing to it for a year, and then I guess we'll have to wait and see if those things get renewed. I'm sure they're going to wait and see how many people actually leverage those benefits. But
that makes sense.
Listen, certainly in the first year, if you use Lyft and DoorDash, I think that they've more than made up for the fact that they increased the annual fee by $100, assuming that you were already someone who was maximizing all of the value. If you're someone who doesn't use either Lyft or DoorDash, it's much harder for me to see the path to compensating for the $100 increase. And then there's, I guess, another contingent. I guess I would put myself in this category who I could be talked into using these services, but I was already sort of considering canceling the card, and then now I need to decide, like, is it still worth it to maintain it? And I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll get your thoughts, and then I'll share mine, because like I said, I had already written like a whole YouTube video about how I was going to cancel the card, and then the annual travel credit hit, and I was like, oh, this isn't as bad as I thought it was. But certainly, I think that the Chase is under some pretty stiff competition. And at the end of the day, when $550 hits as the annual fee for a credit card, it's not nothing, right? Even if you're going to get all the credits, like, you still have to pay it at some point. And again, the question is, like, are you going to start using Lyft and DoorDash more just because you have these credits, which of course is what those companies want you to do, right? They basically want you to spend more money on their products because you feel like you're getting a discount.
Right. But these credits are a loss leader for both the parties involved, right? I mean, I'm sure that Lyft is not eating this entire cost of offering this benefit. I'm sure they're sharing that cost of what's getting reimbursed to customers ultimately, and each party, both Lyft and or DoorDash and Chase is assuming that there's going to be incremental revenue and business driven by these losses, and that's on balance. That's got to be true. If you want to be a smart consumer, then you have to not be one of those people who pays for that loss leader.
Right. Because certainly, like, if I all of a sudden started taking Lyft, 10 times as often as I do the subway just because I'm getting 50% off, then, like, even though I'm saving money on those individual rides, I haven't actually saved any money in total, right? I've spent a lot more. And I think that's like a general argument that people use against credit cards in general, is that they cause you to spend more money, which may or may not be true, and is probably a topic for another podcast. But given these changes and the increased annual fee, what are your thoughts on the product moving forward?
So I really agree with you, about that feeling of the annual fee when it hits. Mine hits in September. It's always a very emotional day for me when I log into my statement and see it. I never expect it. Which is just me being an idiot. But I'm surprised that it's the day that it is every year when it happens. And every year I have the exact same reaction, which is like, oh my gosh, I know that I've gotten all these benefits for this year, but at $450, that's a lot of money. One line item on a card statement, it hits me every year.
Right.
And so I definitely have been going through a lot of the same emotional journey that you have over the past several months, really thinking about whether I should be looking into other lower fee cards that may deliver not even necessarily comparable, but I think sort of proportional benefits to their fee. I don't think I'm as far along on the emotional journey as you are, and I've had a separate but sort of similar journey over the past week, which is when they announced the $100 fee increase, I was essentially almost certain that I was going to end up canceling this card. But then, as I've been reading more into this, getting ready for this morning, and as you and I have been talking, now I'm thinking I may want to stick it out for another year because I feel like I could make more than $100, even just keeping my current habits without any additional incremental spend through these additional benefits. I don't know. What are you thinking?
So basically, I need to pull up the so when the Wells Fargo Propel came out. It came out some number of months ago. I think maybe it was over the summer. I immediately looked at the card and I was like, wow, this offers a lot of really great benefits. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with this product, it has a $0 annual fee. It earns 3x on gas stations, ride shares, transit, flights, hotels, basically travel, and popular streaming services. It also gives you free cell phone damage or theft protection up to $600 if you pay your phone bill with the card. And as of today's recording, its sign up bonus is 20,000 points, which is equivalent to $200 in cash. Originally, when I had signed up, it was 30,000 points. And so from a bonus earning perspective, right, 3x on travel, dining, and popular streaming services is better than the Sapphire Reserve. The no annual fee is, of course, better, right? It's $0. Even if you take full advantage of all the travel credits, you're still paying $150 out of pocket for that card. And then as far as the points redemption, right, the Wells Fargo Propel points, they call them Go Far rewards, can only be redeemed for cash. But if you have the Wells Fargo Visa Signature card, which also doesn't have an annual fee, then your points are now worth 50% more, which of course is one of the primary reasons that we use the Sapphire Reserve, right? Is that when you redeem for travel, you get a 50% bonus.
And I do want to note one thing, and I didn't know that second item that you just shared about the 50% redemption bonus. I want to make sure that listeners understand that that's actually an incredible deal. That's obviously the same redemption bonus that you get on purchases that are restricted to travel inside of Chase's Ultimate Rewards portal on their website. So it's the same redemption benefit for the points that you get through the Sapphire Reserve. One of the big costs that I think a lot of subscribers don't realize to using those points in that way when you book flights through the rewards portal on Chase is that those are actually there's probably a more technical term to use to refer to this, but I'm just going to call them second class flight bookings and other bookings that you're making. There are some benefits, in terms of opportunities to change and other ancillary things that you get, obviously, if you purchase a flight through just an airline's website or some other booking website or whatever, that you don't get access to when you book using Chase's points through their Ultimate Rewards portal. I don't know how you price that cost, when you're making decisions about that, but a 50% redemption value on points as cash on this card, even if you are still going to limit all that spending to travel related purchases, is still going to, there's definitely some bonus to not being limited to making those purchases within a credit card's portal.
Well, let me specify. It's 50% bonus when you redeem only for airfare. It's not when you redeem for anything.
You're just going to have to erase that entire last part that we just...
No, that's fine. That's fine.
I talked for like 30 seconds. It was completely pointless. Okay, so there you go.
No, it's totally fine. So it is only when you redeem for airfare, right? Everything else is just a penny per point. But I do think that there's some truth to what you were saying in terms of, booking on Expedia, which is, I think, who runs Chase's travel portal, is not necessarily the same as booking directly through the provider. So like it's not the same as booking through Delta.com. And they also don't have like a full array of offerings, right? There's some, like I don't think is it Southwest or Frontier Airlines. Some of those low cost providers don't even show up on there.
Yeah, Southwest doesn't allow those external bookers to
aggregators,
to aggregate their information. Yeah, yep.
So even still, there's value in what you brought up, which is that even though the Chase does give you a 50% bonus on all travel, not just airfare, there are downsides. Like for hotels specifically, the big downside is that you're not going to earn, like elites. You're not going to earn nights towards elite status. For example, if you book on like hotels.com or through the Chase Sapphire portal, they only give you benefits if you book directly with the hotel. For whatever reason, airlines will still give you, frequent flyer miles and things like that if you book, or I guess regardless of where you book. Although that's something that I could totally see changing in the future.
That makes sense.
Anyway, like there's these two cards, the Wells Fargo cards, which when you put them both together seem extremely compelling. So I guess like the question is, if you use the annual travel credit to Chase and you spend $150 a year, or in this case, it's going to be $250 a year moving forward. Like, what are the other benefits that these cards don't give you, and are they worth it? So, like, one of them, of course, is Priority Pass lounge membership, which I have never actually used. I think some people get a lot of value out of it. I'm not one of those people. Another one would be like the TSA PreCheck reimbursement. That seems like it's like a duplicated benefit across a lot of cards these days. So, I don't feel like I'd really be losing anything if I lost out on that because I have other cards that offer that as well.
The Priority Pass is actually a really good benefit. There are ways to use it because I would imagine that the reason why you're not using it is because I think you have some form of lounge access separate from Priority Pass. Is that correct?
So I actually don't have any lounge access. I have not. So basically, my travel habits have changed pretty significantly over the last couple of years, right? So, even when I first started the podcast, for example, I lived in North Carolina. I was traveling frequently, and I was traveling across the country to and from North Carolina from LA. And I was racking up a lot of points and miles, and I needed all those benefits. So at that time, I did have a Delta Lounge membership. But now, because I don't travel as much, right? A lot of my travel is like domestic to and from just different cities in the Northeast. I don't have lounge access, and it's really not something that I like lust after. Like I show up to LaGuardia. Pretty much all of my flights that I take are nonstop, so it's not like I have like long layovers anytime.
That's the big difference for you and me is if you're flying, from one of the major U.S. airports,
right?
Even to smaller airports, like to the airport closest to your parents' home, in central New York, that's still going to be a direct flight. But for me, there are no direct flights unless I'm going to Atlanta.
Right, and so like I've always and we're going to talk about the Amex Platinum here in a little bit, but I've always wanted to sign up for these cards just because of the lounge membership that they offer. But again, that's one of those things where we talk about like changing your sort of lifestyle or like, I guess, spending patterns to support these new products, and all of a sudden you're paying more money for them. It just doesn't seem like fiscally responsible.
Yeah.
And so at least for right now, I don't really have a lot of use for those benefits. Chase also offers primary rental car insurance, which it's actually a great benefit.
It is a great benefit. Yeah.
One of, if not the only car that offers $50,000 in primary insurance. But again, I don't rent vehicles, right? Like when I go to a new city, I take rideshare. And
we probably should explain what that primary versus secondary insurance benefit means. So what Peter is referencing is almost all premium tier credit cards will offer some form of car rental insurance. So you always, if you're paying with a card that's Visa Signature or Visa Infinite or whatever, if you're renting a car on that, you always want to decline that ancillary insurance that the rep offers you when you book the car, because your card is going to pay for that. But as far as I know, I think you're correct, on every credit card besides the Chase Sapphire Reserve, that insurance, it's what's called secondary insurance. So it hits if your primary insurance that you have for your regular car that you drive every day doesn't cover everything, that secondary insurance will kick in. So you're always going to see a premium increase on your personal auto insurance if you get into an accident or have some sort of issue in a rental car. What's special about the Reserve is it's primary insurance, and so your personal auto insurance company never has to get involved if you're using that card benefit. It's a really unique benefit, and I would hope that the average person isn't getting into enough accidents in their rental cars to ever actually see any monetary recompense for having this benefit. But for peace of mind, it is extremely valuable, and it definitely puts the Reserve ahead above at least all the other cards in its category.
Yeah, and it's actually 75,000, not 50,000, as I previously quoted.
That's a pretty good benefit. That gives me peace of mind. I rent cars all the time. That definitely gives me peace of mind when I'm renting cars, knowing that I'm not going to end up in a situation where my personal auto insurance premiums are going up.
Yeah, and so basically, I'm sure there's people listening to this who are sort of yelling at their podcast, or their phone or whatever, and saying, what about the fact that you can transfer points, right? I think at the end of the day, especially when you're on the points guy or you're following people in the points community and they talk about, redemptions worthy of 2, 3, 4, 5 cents per dollar, whatever, it's all because you've taken your points and you've transferred them to a partner, and then you've redeemed them in the local currency. And so, maybe you got a flight that would have cost you, say, I don't know, $500 or $1,000 cash, right? First class, say from New York to Las Vegas, and you paid 50,000 points, right? Which you transferred from Chase to, say, United. And all of a sudden now that's how you got 2 cents per point worth of value, right? Because 50,000 points for cash is $500. 50,000 points through the portal is $750, but 50,000 if you redeem for United in this case is $1,000. And so Chase, of course, has like a long list of transfer partners, United, JetBlue, some foreign airlines, hotel partners, etc. And the points transfer at a 1-to-1 rate. It's almost an instantaneous thing. And so I think the biggest thing is how often are you using that as a benefit? Because if you use the Wells Fargo cards, there are no transfer partners, right? 50% is the best you're going to be able to do ever. And so the question is how much value is in transferring. How often do you transfer points?
So not as often as I used to, although still sometimes. I used to transfer them more back when the primary card was the Chase Sapphire Preferred, which, as a review for anybody who's not using that card presently, or who never has, that redeems points at 1.25 points per dollar in the internal travel portal versus 1.5. And back when that was the default option, I would frequently transfer points to Southwest, which has an extremely favorable worth per point value, just because of the way that their internal points get valued inside of their system. So I don't use it very much anymore. I do think it's a really interesting benefit, but you have to be a very specific type of person. Southwest is a really good one. I'm sure there are others, and I think that there are benefits if you're booking a lot of business and first class flights. If you lived in Baltimore, or Houston near a Southwest hub, it might be worth considering how highly you would price that value. But for the average user, compared with the 1.5 cent per point redemption value in the internal portal, I don't think that it's as powerful as it used to be.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, I don't expect to make a decision today as to whether or not I'm going to cancel this product. I think the Wells Fargo suite of cards is an interesting thing to consider. Another one I think worth considering is the Capital One Venture card.
Yep, I have some friends who have that, and they really enjoy that card.
It's interesting because, again, it's one of those cards that sort of flies under the radar. It's certainly not as popular with the younger credit card consumer, if you will. But that card is super interesting in that it earns, 2x on every purchase. There's no annual fee for the first year. It's $95 thereafter. You can then redeem those. You can redeem those points for travel and things, and you can also, they actually have transfer partners. So interesting, sort of wrinkle there is that they have 15 transfer partners, which are like Air Canada, Emirates, JetBlue, Qatar, Singapore. It doesn't look like they have any, there's no Delta or American or anything, but still some of those more popular, fancy airlines for if you're going to redeem in a first class or things like that.
Or even if you're doing a lot of international travel overall. I mean,
yeah,
that could be big.
This card also has that TSA pre-check credit, which I mentioned earlier. And so, I guess the bottom line is I think Chase, and I think we should, wrap up talking about some of its big competitors, right? I think the cards that the Sapphire Reserve is trying to pair itself or compete with are Amex Platinum and the Citi Prestige. Right, so Citi Prestige is probably the least popular of the three, but $495 annual fee. They recently re-released this card, right? They have all these new benefits and perks now. It's 5x on air travel, 5x on restaurants, 3x on hotels, 3x on cruise lines, 1x on everything else. They have the $250 travel credit. They have a complimentary fourth night free. So it's certainly a compelling card. And again, the fourth night free used to be the primary reason people got this, because you could rack up thousands of dollars in value on the Citi Prestige, but Citi, now you're capped. You can only use this benefit twice a year, which might still be valuable for some people. I think it's probably less valuable for others. I've never actually had this card, but obviously people who do speak highly of that benefit and its reward categories are pretty popular. For my money, I think that with the Amex Platinum, for example, again, we'll just talk about that one real quick, is you get the $200 a year in Uber Cash, $200 airline fee credit. Unfortunately, that airline fee credit used to be pretty valuable, and now I think it's much less so because you can't buy gift cards anymore.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's limiting.
Yeah, so that's a huge bummer. I think now what people are doing is they're choosing, because you have to choose your airline for which airline you want the credit to be applied to. And I think people are choosing Spirit or Frontier, and they're just saying that, if I fly on them once a year, everything I do is going to result in a fee being charged, right? Check bag, choosing a seat, what have you. And so I think people are using it for that. But certainly not being able to buy those gift cards is a bummer, because it used to be that between the airline fee credit and Uber Cash, you could get down to a net effective annual fee of $150. But now, I mean, I don't know. I don't pay any annual airline fees, really, right? I have.
Yeah, neither do I.
I have a minimal status on Delta, which is where I do most of my flying, and then the rest is on JetBlue. and I basically don't check bags or anything like that. So, with this product, again, their annual fee is also $550, which seems to be like that's going to be the benchmark moving forward. And of course, the interesting thing about this card is that you get lounge access at the Amex Centurion and Delta lounges, which in and of themselves are probably worth $550. But
that's interesting.
It just all depends on how much you travel, right? Like if you can use the lounge access monthly, right, it's probably worth it. If you can use it weekly, it's obviously worth it. But if you can only use it like quarterly, then maybe it's not worth it. You know what I mean? And obviously, if you're using it less than quarterly, it's almost certainly not worth it. So that's like the thing for me is when I look at the Amex Platinum, I'm like, obviously the card seems super cool. It has a lot of great benefits, and I'm sure some people get incredible amounts of value out of it. But I think that the thing to, like, maybe one of the takeaways is that you shouldn't feel like beholden to any one particular product, right? I know that people, for whatever reason, they're very scared of like canceling credit cards and changing the sort of makeup of their wallet. But really, your cards need to benefit the way in which you're like spending money and how you want to ultimately redeem the benefits that they provide to you. So again, a couple of years ago when I was traveling quite a bit more, this card would have made a lot more sense, right? As opposed to now, I think the cards that I'm more interested in are just the ones that are a little bit cheaper because I'm going to ultimately be paying cash for most of my first class travel, right? Because it's in the Northeast and those flights aren't very expensive. And so I basically just want to try to save money in that way. And that's why for me, like the Sapphire Reserve, I was going to cancel it originally. And now I think I'm probably still planning to do that. Or at least I'm going to call and say, I'm planning on canceling it. What can you offer me? Just because, and I've talked about this sort of quite a bit, right? Asking for redemption or retention offers is a pretty powerful tactic. And I think Chase is, I think you can get a retention offer on most cards one time. And because I've never asked for one before, I would expect, especially now with the increase in the annual fee, that they might offer something, whether that's like points or what have you.
Yeah, I've got to feel that, for me, it's probably roughly the same situation. I mean, I'm sure that when and if I call and make that request, whomever, is looking is going to realize that, I've been using these Chase cards for, I think, 6 years now. And I do spend, on an annual basis, pretty much all of my money on these Chase cards. So my spend is pretty significant. And you got to assume that when they look at the background of a consumer like that, they're going to, at least one time make a fairly compelling retention offer, which could change the calculus for another year. Maybe we end up canceling around annual fee time in 2021 instead of in 2020.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, I guess to wrap it up, the bottom line is, as it is always, right? I feel like I always give people this advice is like, you really have to, it's so easy, I think, to be swayed by the different marketing tactics that these companies use. And like you said earlier, right, there's very, very smart people pulling the strings at these companies to try to get you to sign up for these products, even if you maybe shouldn't, right? Because it won't benefit you the way that it's going to benefit somebody else. Yep. So you have to know what your goals are, have to understand where it is that you're spending money as best you can, try to estimate what the cash value is of all these different benefits. Like, saying lounge access is exciting, right? And there will be some websites that try to estimate what the value is, but only you know the value, right? If you're using it once a year, you basically paid $550 to access the lounge, which is probably not super compelling. So, I'm going to be talking more about the Chase Sapphire Reserve as I ultimately make a decision. Presumably, I will publish a YouTube video detailing whatever decision I come to. So be sure to check us out on YouTube. And is there anything you want to leave them with?
No, I just want to thank you for inviting me to join you in this discussion today, and really enjoyed it.
And this is also, we set a record. This is the longest Pursuing Points podcast of all time. So I hope people enjoy it, and we will see you in the future.
Thanks, everyone.